The Treasury Department report on Waco said they had no raid plan until 3 days before the raid. That too is a lie, one of many, and I have a classified Army document I've just written about, dated 25 days prior to the raid, in which an Army lawyer, Major Philip W. Lindley, Assistant JAG Officer for the Army Special Operations Command in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, referred to the ATF's raid plan as part of the Army's evaluation of the ATF's training request. And Major Lindley's memo, for the record, indicates the ATF asked for the presence of Green Berets, and I quote, in proximity to the target, end quote. And at least 4 Green Berets were here that fateful day, and I'll tell you who they were: Sergeant First Class Chris Dunn, Staff Sergeants Warren Ackley, Bob Moreland, and John Wilson. And I'd like somebody to put these men under oath and ask them what they were doing here, where they were, and why they were here. Major Lindley, who had his career threatened over this memo, characterized the ATF raid plan as, quote, an actual law enforcement mission with civilian targets to be attacked. And he didn't say it was a law enforcement mission with search warrants to be served. It was a law enforcement mission with civilian targets to be attacked. That's the Army's characterization of the ATF raid plan. He also said, and I quote, the degree of involvement proposed crossed the line and exposed everyone involved to criminal as well as civil liability. I mean, you can't get much plainer than that, folks, not where I'm from. After consulting with other military lawyers, Lindley said all agreed that the raid plan was not advisable. As I said, Major Lindley had his career threatened over this. Some other people did too. But no doubt there are many other good and honest government employees who we do not know of who have been threatened if they dare step out of the government's dark shroud of silence into the light of day and speak the truth. There are also, and I know you're not going to like to hear this, but there are also good and decent agents in the ATF and the FBI who wish they could speak up and tell the truth, but they don't dare, because they have homes and families, and they know firsthand what the federal government can do to homes with Bradleys and M1 tanks, what can be done to families with poison gas, and they are as frustrated as you and I. I've got a couple of letters here from ATF agents. I want to read them to you. They're about Waco, and they're published in the National Association of Treasury Agent newsletter. It's called The Agent, and I just wanted I picked a couple of samples here to tell you that they're just as worried about this as we are. The first one here says 4 ATF agents were killed during an ATF search warrant execution on February 28th. After an investigation by outside experts commissioned by the Treasury Department, the official report indicated that ATF supervisors Serabin and Winoski had neither the experience nor training to command such an activity, that they knew the crucial element of surprise had been lost, that nevertheless they ordered the assault on the Davidian compound to proceed, and finally they later lied about the whole thing. Winoski and Serabin were placed on paid administrative leave for almost 2 years. In late October of 1994, Winoski and Serabin were fired by ATF. Several weeks later, in mid-December of 1994, they were reinstated. Am I missing something here? Didn't 4 agents get killed? Weren't scores of women and children slain? Was the Waco report wrong, or has this only been a bad nightmare? This whole thing is rotten and stinks to high heaven. I want to read you one more letter. It's very short. I believe Serabin and Winoski have the proverbial smoking gun. Why else would ATF cave in and give them a favorable settlement with such record-breaking speed? Maybe an impartial investigation will disclose that back in February of '93, Serabin and Winoski were only following orders. An investigation may reveal that they've been covering up for someone higher in the ATF chain of command all these months. And that's what I want to talk to you about right now. We now know who that higher-up was. The Friday before the raid, former ATF Director Steve Higgins promised his bosses in the Treasury Department that if there was any hint that the element of surprise had been lost, that the raid would be called off. And as we know, the ATF raid commanders, Phil Winoski and Chuck Serabin and Ted Royster, all knew that the element of surprise was lost. All the agents in the raid knew the element of surprise was lost. Mr. Serabin and Mr. Winoski were fired for ordering the raid to go ahead anyway. They got their jobs back, but they didn't make the final decision to go ahead with the raid. In the final minutes before gunfire erupted at Mt Carmel, and I'm talking about a very short span of time, these 2 men, using the cell phones issued them by the ATF, made a direct call into the office of Ron Noble, the Undersecretary of Treasury for Law Enforcement, in the Treasury Department, a position to which he had not even yet been confirmed. Mr. Noble, you see, is the man who was in charge of producing the Treasury's investigative report on the Waco massacre. Well, how convenient. He is the same man who gave the final go-ahead for this raid. It wasn't until lawyers for Mr. Winoski and Mr. Sarabin subpoenaed the cellular phone records for 28 February that the Treasury Department suddenly offered them their jobs back, with full back pay and even to pay their attorney fees. I want you to call these people in Congress and ask them why Mr. Noble has not been put on a witness stand and put under oath and ask about this. Because I tell you, if Mr. Noble knew, Mr. Benson knew, and that puts his resignation as Secretary of the Treasury in a whole new light. Ask your congressman just how badly one must err to be held accountable. How bad do you have to screw up to be fired from a federal job? What degree of incompetence, malfeasance, malice, or pure evil must be proven to hold a federal law enforcement agent accountable? I'd like to know. As columnist Paul Craig Roberts, himself a former Treasury agent, wrote in the Wall Street Journal, Waco happened because federal agents don't expect to be held accountable. There is no higher authority looking over their shoulders. We need a permanent special prosecutor to investigate and bring indictments against both federal agents who use excessive force and U.S. attorneys who bring phony cases in order to cover up those abuses. Nothing less than the credibility of the federal government is at stake. I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. I want you to pray, because I know there are a lot of people here who believe in the power of prayer. And I want you to pray that that the conscience of the people who are out here, all the FBI agents, all the ATF agents, are going to work on them and are going to make them come forward and tell the truth. I want you to, I'm hoping that Judge Walter Smith here in Waco, that his conscience is going to be prodded by the power of prayer. Walter Smith is a disappointing specimen as a human being. He was, in my estimation, a half-assed citizen and a half-assed Republican, and when you put it all together on the judge's bench, he was a whole ass of a judge. I want you to pray that people like Jeffrey Jamar, who's had to resign his job, because this has worked on Mr. Jamar. I've seen him. He's aged a lot. This has aged him a lot. I want you to pray that these people think about this and people come forward and tell the truth, because that's really important. The Davidians tell me that their dead friends and family members are at peace and that judgment awaits the living. For everyone involved, the living and the dead, the festering rot of injustice continues, unalleviated by the salve of truth. And when these people who are here go to bed at night, I want them to dream about this. I hope they do. I want their sleep to be stalked by the specter of the people who died out here in the fire, whose fervent prayers and their dreams are probably muffled by gas masks as the flames lit closer, maybe by the desperate pleas of children groping through black smoke, crying for their mothers and fathers. And perhaps their sleep will be haunted by the shrieks of agony as hellish flames roar through their dreams. Thank you.